Hello, my name is Lars Kessing and I'm a professor in psychiatry in Copenhagen. I have been doing research for years now within bipolar disorder and unipolar disorder. Currently, we have one of our research areas within smartphones. And smartphones have the potential, I think, to change treatment as well as research dramatically in the future within bipolar disorder. The great thing about smartphones is that you can get self-reported data as well as smartphone-based, what we can call objective data on a daily basis from the patient. Although they are not in our office, you'll get a lot of knowledge about them, and a second thing, patients love it. They like these things, and clinicians are happy to get access to information about their patients when they are not in their office. I'm doing research within bipolar disorder and major depression only, in fact. So these are my areas. And I will congratulate you on this really excellent Foundation FondaMental, because I think that's so important to have a scientific and clinical society where clinicians can meet and discuss, but also take initiatives to research. Do you get what I am saying, or is it too English? It's okay. Too Danish, perhaps. Yeah, I think it is fundamental for psychiatry that clinicians and researchers cooperate, perhaps even much more than we do. In fact, psychiatry is an academic field, so every clinician should know about research or even do some research. This is just set for inspiration, because it, of course, may be difficult in a busy daily clinical life to engage in research. Don't you agree? Okay. So how many in here are doing research him or herself? Could you please raise your hands? Oh, that's more, about half of the audience. That is excellent. How many of you are medical doctors, please? How many are psychologists? Yeah, how many are nurses? One. It's good you are here. Welcome. So this is a mixture. That's nice. How many of you do specifically treat patients with bipolar disorder? Okay, that's quite a lot too. And the rest of you treat patients with schizophrenia and unipolar disorder and other kinds of things, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Yes, then I will just move to this area here. Talking about smartphones, we have been doing research within smartphones in bipolar disorder for now about 8 years. It started out as a EU-funded project, and now we have got another funding from EU to run this study, and we are doing currently a number of studies just funded by part of the Danish state and part of private fundings. So I'm going to give you just a presentation of this area, and I hope we can do it a little interactive, and you're mostly welcome to put forward some questions so we can have a little discussion. That is just my disclosure here. So you can call this, I tried to have my smartphone in my pocket, but that was not allowed for technical reasons. But the rest of you, I guess, have your smartphone in your pocket. And of course, you can, this was in Nature in 2016. It says here that mobile mental health apps have exploded onto the market, but few have been thoroughly tested. And that is, in fact, one of the key issues of my talk. That is that there are so many apps out there. Most of them are developed by IT researchers. Very few are developed together with clinicians as you, or together with clinical researchers even. Why so? Because these apps are mainly made for profit, to gain some money. These are private companies, of course. They have to earn their money. That's a fair thing. But most of these apps have not been evaluated by clinicians, and most of them have not been validated at all. It may be that some of them may cause some harm, in fact. That could be a possibility. For example, just one issue, monitoring suicidal thoughts on a daily basis. If patients are going to self-report using an app that they have suicidal thoughts, I have that today, I have that tomorrow, and so on, that might in fact end up worsening suicidal thoughts. Just one possibility. We have some research evidence suggesting that there might be some bad side effects of self-monitoring. There might be. It should be used probably, and to my point of view, there should be a feedback mechanisms to clinicians. So patients are not only using a smartphone or an app themselves without any response from clinicians. At least when we're talking about bipolar disorder, which is a severe mental disorder, I think we are not, at least, it might be in 10 years or in 20 years that patients with bipolar disorder can do much more themselves using an app, but we have no evidence for that at the current state. So at the current state, I think this has to be developed together with clinicians and researchers, and to be tested whether there's an effect or on the contrary, perhaps side effects. So that is just the pocket psychiatry here. There are a number of possibilities, but there are also a number of possible side effects or drawbacks which have not been really elucidated yet. So this was just about smartphones. Then you can ask why bipolar disorder? Why not schizophrenia, perhaps? Why didn't we start out with schizophrenia? Well, there's a number of reasons for bipolar disorder. That bipolar or patients with bipolar disorder may be well suited for using apps and smartphones. The onset is, as you know, in the adolescence and early adulthood. There are recurrent episodes, and there are inter-episodic instability, meaning that between depressions, between manic episodes, patients present with minor depressive symptoms or minor manic symptoms, hypomanic symptoms. That's well known and well described in the field now, that few patients with bipolar disorder achieve full remission for longer periods. They fluctuate in mood, in sleep, in energy, and so on. And that might be a very a good target for daily intervention, of course. Smartphones is something you can do on a daily basis. In contrast to when you see your patients, you see them on a monthly basis or a bi-monthly basis or even longer, and you don't know what happens with your patients between the meetings with you. You don't have any information about it, at least, until they turn up next time. You get the point? Here you can get daily information using smartphones. I'll come back to that. Then one thing more about bipolar disorder is that it is characterized by changes in behavior and energy. What does that have to do with a smartphone? Well, you can record these things automatically using a smartphone. You can record social activity using a smartphone. What is social activity? Today, social activity is what you do with your smartphone together with another one, a colleague or another buddy. You send SMS, you call, you do a lot of things to have social interactions. All these things can be monitored or be recorded if you have statisticians who get access to these data. And there are other what we call objectively measured illness activity, objectively measured by the smartphone. These are passive data. You just get them. If the patient has given you, if the patient participates in a study or has given you permission to get the data, you just get them passively on a daily basis, the way the patient uses his or her smartphone. Right? You get the point here? So as these changes, as behavior and energy fluctuate in bipolar disorder, it's possible to record and perhaps even to predict an upcoming relapse of depressive symptoms or relapse of hypomanic symptoms using these behavioral data. And then finally, one more thing which I think it's more easy to work with patients with bipolar disorder than, for example, patients with schizophrenia, in that way that patients with bipolar disorder in general are more able to change their behavior based on information, psychoeducation, and so on. That has been proven in studies, have shown that patients who get group-based psychoeducation are able to change their behavior afterwards, after the psychoeducation has ended, and they're able to use this information for months or even years to change their life, to change the way they study at university, the way they try to get up to pass an exam. They had to read a lot, but perhaps when you have a bipolar disorder, it's not good for you to read in the night. You should try to get your sleep, and so on. And they're able to learn these things. We have proved that also in Denmark, in Copenhagen, showing that group-based psychoeducation combined with optimized pharmacological treatment decreases the rate of getting hospitalized 6 years ahead. That's a major effect, in fact. That's not the same with patients with schizophrenia. They might also have benefit from psychoeducation or even for cognitive behavioral therapy, but they tend to forget it or not use it when they stop. That's why, for example, in Copenhagen, patients with schizophrenia are now they're not provided with a 2-year specialized program, but with a 5-year, because it's not enough with 2 years. So for that reason, patients with bipolar disorder perhaps are able to learn much more themselves together with a clinician. They can learn from using this smartphone system, which might or may, as ours, integrate psychoeducation programs through the app. Okay, this was just some background story for this. This continues. This is just to show you this picture about it's the scientific switch in paradigm from focus on episodes to focus on inter-episodic mood instability. And you might also say this should not only be the scientific switch, but also the clinical switch. It's not enough just to prevent depression and manic episodes. What patients want, what their relatives want, is to feel well, to be well between episodes, to be able to do their study, to do their work, to have a nice family, and to interact with them. They want to be well all the way through. So here we have a manic episode, and here we have a depressive episode, and here we have the inter-episodic mood instability, and also here. And we know that such small fluctuations here, these are only minor fluctuations. We know that such instability predicts increased risk of recurrence of episodes and also rehospitalization or hospitalization in itself. So, just to repeat myself here, smartphone-based treatment this is the window of opportunity here, so to speak. It's not when patients are manic, they will not use the smartphone. They will not use the app. But here they may be able to use it, and here, and so on. And that is, in fact, most of the days, of course, for patients with bipolar disorder. So that's just also some background information. So with this short introduction, you can come up with some statements here about this, that electronic monitoring using smartphones in fact has the potential to change treatment. I really believe that is possible. We are not there yet, but we might reach that point. And also to change research paradigms in bipolar disorder, because we can get a lot of data about patients, for example, in a randomized control trial. In a randomized control trial conducted in the traditional way, researchers have to interview patients perhaps every 3rd month or every half year, and we don't know what happens between. Now we can get a lot of information on a daily basis, and that could be included in these randomized control trials. We have done one randomized control trial, and we are doing 2 other currently, but there are very few trials, randomized control trials, within this area so far. But I mean, in general, you can include smartphone-based data in randomized control trials. I mean, a study comparing the effect of lithium versus quetiapine, for example, the outcome could be mood instability measured by smartphones. It could be a simple and cheap way to, it could be an alternative at least. So this is all the optimistic stuff up here, and then there are some limitations, and that's just what I have pointed out for you. Very few of these apps or smartphone-based systems have been documented scientifically so far. So these are the 3 issues I'll touch upon in my talk from now on. It is about daily self-monitoring of mood symptoms using a smartphone-based system. The question is, of course, here, if patients are going to, on a daily basis, report their mood or their energy or their sleep, are these data valid? I mean, are patients able, for example, to record their own mood on a daily basis in a valid way? Mood, what is that? Mood is not just feeling bad a little one day and better the other day. When you have depressed mood, that's for longer time, and when you're hypomanic, it's for longer period. It's at least for some days. Are they able to do that? We have some data on that. Then I'll present for you results from the first randomized control trial. What we did here was to evaluate the effect of daily self-reporting using the smartphone system combined with the entire system. There was a study nurse who could contact patients if she could see on the curves, on the self-reported mood curves, that this patient was decreasing in mood. Then she could contact him or her and ask what is happening, how are you doing, get to confirm this or disconfirm this, and she could suggest some actions. It was quite simple system. And then the third issue here of my talk is continuous automatic collection of real-time data using smartphones. What do I mean with real-time data? I mean, these data are from the natural environment of the patient. These are not experimental data. These are not in an experimental laboratory. These are from their entire life. They are reporting every day, every evening. They are reporting in this system how their day has been. And some of them do that for half a year or 1 year or longer. Yeah, so these are the three key issues here. And then before moving on to this, perhaps I should just tell you a little about how does this work, how does this function at all. And we have self-monitoring, and we have the clinician, a doctor, a nurse, a psychologist, it could be whoever. And then when the patient report their data, then they are sent to the doctor. They are sent indirectly, and I'm happy to say here that we are co-working with a French company who has provided the server, a safe server. Of course, there's a lot of ethical issues, a lot of security issues about these highly personal data. And even the name of this French company is secret. So I will not tell you. But there are a lot of security things here. But all of these procedures have, of course, been approved by EU as well as the Danish regulatory authorities. So the way it works is that patients, they use the app, and all the data is sent to the French server, and from that French server it can be sent to the doctor, who will get the identification number from the patient, him or herself. And of course, the other way around, the clinician can also send some information to the patient using the app system. So this is a double feedback loop, so to say. So the first issue here, daily self-monitoring of mood symptoms, and this is just a simple table here. What we did was we asked the patient to rate themselves on a mood scale from 0 being full remitted, and then down to -3 feeling fully depressed, -2, -1, and -0.5. So this was down to the depressed way, and then also up, feeling a little hypomanic, -0.5 or +0.5 or +1, and up to 3, full manic. And then patients were in this study here. They were rated by a research PhD student using the Hamilton Depression Rating Scale, 17 items, and also the Young Mania Rating Scale, that is for mania, assessing manic symptoms. That was done every month for half a year. And what we then did was to just simply associate the score on the Hamilton with the mood, self-reported mood, going from -3 to +3. And what we saw was a highly statistical significant correlation. So patients were able to in a rather valid way report their depressed mood. That was also the case for manic symptoms when they were in a manic state. However, as you can see here, the coefficient was lower. Perhaps you cannot see it, but it was lower. So patients in a hypomanic state were not that good, or in a moderate manic state that were not that good to evaluate their mood as being elevated. Well, that's not surprising, but that's just what we have showed here. So you should be aware of these things if you get data from an app. Patients who are depressed are relatively good in evaluating their own mood, but patients who are hypomanic or manic are not. So you cannot trust these data as well as good. Okay. Then we did a simple study. All of you who are within bipolar disorder, of course, know that we divide bipolar disorder into bipolar 1 disorder and bipolar 2 disorder. Do you all know that? Everybody? Bipolar 1 disorder is the classic manic depressive illness. Patients have depressions and manic episodes. Bipolar 2 disorder is recurrent depression and perhaps now and then a hypomanic episode. Just a mild manic episode. Those of you who are within bipolar disorder are well aware of these things, I guess. And what we know from a lot of research, now I'll put it in another way, frequently bipolar 2 disorder has been regarded as the little sister or the little brother to bipolar 1, suggesting that it's a milder form of illness because they have only some depressions and then now and then a hypomanic state. You aware of that? Some regard it as a mild condition to treat. However, research during, let's say, the last 5 years have proven the opposite. It's in fact very difficult to treat patients with bipolar disorder type 2 because they frequently suffer from depressive symptoms, even more frequent than patients with bipolar 1 disorder. I'll say that is well known nowadays. We know that. So we did a study comparing bipolar 1 patients and bipolar 2 patients. Bipolar disorder type 1 versus bipolar type 2 using smartphone-based data, just to see if these patients with bipolar disorder type 1 and 2 differed according to self-reported data. And the short answer is they did. It was kind of a validation study, you can say, external validation study. This was quite simple. Smartphone-based system for self-monitoring. We developed that, a total of only 33 patients, but they were treated or they self-reported data for a long time, up to nearly a year, using these data, and it was of course a lot of observations. More than 8,000 observations were included in this study. And what did we find here? Well, patients with bipolar disorder type 2 compared to patients with type 1, the classic manic depressive illness, those with bipolar 2 experienced a significant lower mean level of mood on this scale here. You cannot see that in the end of, you cannot read anything down there, can you? Can you read some of this? Excellent, you have good French eyes. Patients with bipolar 2 were less time euthymic, they were less time remitted. They were remitted only in about 50% of their time, in contrast to those with bipolar 1 who were in a remitted state for 3/4 of their time. Those with bipolar 2 had a higher proportion of time with depressive symptoms, 51 versus 18, and so on. There were no difference in hypomanic states because there were also relatively few hypomanic states, so that was not the case. So the conclusion was that euthymia was obtained for a substantial proportion, 70% of patients with bipolar disorder type 1, but despite ongoing treatment, only for half of the time for patients with bipolar disorder type 2. This is a difficult disorder to treat. So, of course, this emphasizes the need for improving treatment strategies for bipolar disorder type 2. The reason is that pharmacologically, we only have three drugs with proven effect for bipolar depression. These are lithium, lamotrigine, and quetiapine. These are the three drugs with proven effects for bipolar depression. We have a lot of drugs which has proven effects for mania, as you know, all the antipsychotics and so on. But for bipolar depression, we only have these three drugs, and I think international guidelines agree on this. So, but also the reason why I present this for you is that daily self-monitoring seems to be a valid way to measure mood and also to discriminate between these two disorders here. We call that an external validation of the system. Okay. So then I'll move on to this results from the first randomized control trial on daily electronic self-monitoring using the smartphone system. This has been published, you cannot see that, but this was published 2 years ago, Psychological Medicine 2015, a randomized placebo-controlled trial. It was placebo-controlled because the control group also got a smartphone, or a smartphone themselves. They did not get access to the app, so they could not use this app system, but they got a new smartphone as all the others in the study. So the objective was to investigate whether the use of daily electronic self-monitoring, including this 2-level feedback loop to the clinic, and the clinic was a research study nurse using, and she could also contact the treating physician, the treating medical doctor, if there were any medical challenges, if the dose of quetiapine should be increased or the dose of lithium should be decreased or whatever, or perhaps also new treatment should be started. She could not do that herself, of course, as a nurse, but she could contact the responsible physician. And the outcome was depressive and manic symptoms in patients with bipolar disorder, and these were both bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 disorders. And the trial was for half a year. We included 78 patients, and they were rated with Hamilton and Young Mania every month for 6 months. This was the trial period was for 6 months. So of course the hypothesis was that using this smartphone-based app would decrease the prevalence of depressive symptoms as well as manic symptoms during a 6-month period. So, do you know what we found here? This is challenging, I can tell you. It's not straightforward, unfortunately, because overall, as illustrated by these two red figures out here, there was no effect at all. We found no effect of using the smartphone system versus treatment as usual. That was not what we hoped for. That was that was not expected. But we did some sub-analysis, and I'll come back to the conclusion of this. We did some sub-analysis. First, I should say that as patients who were included in this trial, they were relatively stable at inclusion because they were treated in the Copenhagen Mood Disorder Clinic, and those clinicians there, they're quite good in treating patients. So they are even perhaps too good, because it's hard to make it better than that in a randomized control trial. Might be part of it, but we did only include patients who scored below 14 on Hamilton or below Young Mania, below 14 on the Young Mania rating scale score. So they were partly or fully in remission when included, and for that reason they may simply have been too good. There were too few symptoms to make it to prove an effect in a randomized controlled trial. Supporting that is that we did some sub-analysis those patients who at inclusion of the study scored more than 7, they had at least some symptoms of depression. For those, we found a statistical significant effect. Unfortunately, it went the wrong way. So those who used this system, they stayed depressive longer than those who did not use it. Bad luck. Bad luck. On the other hand, those who had some hypomanic symptoms when they were included in the trial, those who scored more than 7, they did better. They had fewer hypomanic symptoms or manic symptoms during these 6 months. This was statistically significant, and the effect was the right way, so to say, that those who use the system presented with fewer hypomanic symptoms during the 6 months trial. So what could we learn from this study? Well, we could learn overall that there was no effect. Then you can say, okay, there might be some sub-learnings here, that we should take care if patients are just monitoring their mood on a daily basis. It may in fact deteriorate. It may make it worsen. It may worsen the depressive symptoms for them. And of course we don't know why, but one speculation might be that when you report on a daily basis that your mood is low, and you continue to do that on a daily basis for 1 week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, for longer, and you are getting presented curves of your mood, and you see that it's -3, -3, -2, -3 for long periods, you may get the feeling as a patient, I'll never improve. I'm not worth for it. Even this fine study using smartphones, I'm not able to use it. So it may induce depressive rumination.
Just a very quick interruption.
Yeah.
They were getting a feedback, right?
Yeah, they could see the curves, and they were also contacted by the nurse, but perhaps not enough. Perhaps not enough. So what we learned about this is that even though we had a study nurse here try to improve their mood when they were down, we did not have specific focus on that. So in another trial we have set up now, we have included a behavioral or cognitive behavioral system in the app. So when patients, there are some psychoeducation, and then we mention the term depressive rumination. If you have the experience that your feelings are running in the same way all day long, and day after day, that you'll never improve, you're feeling low, you'll not come back to your study or work or whatever, use this system. And then there's a system they can use how to stop depressive rumination. That is a well-proven psychotherapeutic approach in clinical life. There are some stop mechanisms, and there are other ways, and they are allowed to get guided around in the app to stop this. Further, the study nurses have now specific focus on depressive rumination. But that is just something we have taken over to the next trial. So this was this. Fortunately, there was, on the opposite, there was an effect on hypomanic symptoms, and we don't know again, but my feeling about this and the clinicians' feelings about this is that patients who report on a daily basis +1, +1.5, +2, and get figures out of that, they suddenly get a visual documentation about their own state of mind. And they may be able to use that and to recognize, okay, I am in fact continuously hypomanic. I'm even evaluating myself like that, and the study nurse confirms that when I talk to her in the phone or when I even meet with her. So patients with hypomanic symptoms are able to use the smartphone system, perhaps, and to stop, to break their escalating hypomanic states. Perhaps this was only in secondary analysis, of course. So the conclusion here on this randomized control trial was that overall no effect. Also that daily electronic self-monitoring may sustain depressive symptoms due to depressive ruminations, ? And that daily electronic self-monitoring may decrease manic symptoms. Of course, we need more randomized control trials on this. This is in fact the only one in bipolar disorder which has tried to investigate whether there's an effect in a randomized control trial of using a smartphone-based system or not. It's the only trial so far, but I really encourage all of you also. I know that some here are also within this research area, but also in general, I think there are some possibilities here. But we need to prove the effect. Also because, of course, the end possibility here is that if we can prove an effect of this, this system should be bought by your hospital. Marion will buy that for you, or someone above you would buy that and say, okay, it's well proven, it's scientific data, it shows that patients are less hospitalized, or they do much better. But of course, some company has to provide this, so it costs money. And politicians and administrators will not buy anything, to my point of view, if there's no scientific evidence for that. So we are working on trying to get some evidence. I can tell you now that this is the first randomized control trial, and now we are doing a second randomized control trial. We are nearly finished with that. That is patients who are not treated in a mood disorder clinic, but who are treated by clinicians all over Denmark. They are treated by private general or by general practitioners, or by private psychiatrists, or by hospital psychiatrists also. And of course, the variation in treatment services is greater there, and I think there's some scope for improvement there. So that's the first trial. The second trial is about patients who are hospitalized for bipolar disorder, and also one for unipolar disorder, but hospitalized for bipolar disorder, and we want to test if using such a smartphone system, the entire system, also combining cognitive behavioral therapy and psychoeducation, whether that can prevent rehospitalization within half a year. So that was just that part of it. Then I will move on to the last part of my talk, which in fact might be the most interesting to my own point of view. This is how we can use these passive data, the automatic collected real-time data, which we get just by that fact that patients are using an app on a smartphone, and we can have access to their data if they allow us to do that. I'll give you some examples on that. The thing is that these data may tell us something about the illness activity of patients on a daily basis. So now we can know something about our patients when they are not in your office. You can, when you're on holiday or when you're on a weekend, you also get the data. You get that all day through. These are small for you to see in the behind, but I think I'll skip that one because it's too small for you. I'll go straight to the conclusions. Here again, patients were rated on a monthly basis by a PhD student using the Hamilton Depression Rating Scale score and the Young Mania Rating Scale score. And in relation to depressive episodes or depressive symptoms, we found that the score on the Hamilton correlated positively with the duration of incoming and outgoing calls per day. So the more depressed patients were, the longer they got calls from their family or friends or whatever, the longer they talked to them in the phone. And also the longer they made outgoing or outgoing calls. The outgoing calls were also longer. So patients in a somewhat depressive state had more telephone communication. Relatives called them and they called others. You might say that they feel that they are in a need for help, and relatives or friends also had the same feeling, so there was a lot of communication going on. In relation to the hypomanic or mildly manic state, scores on the young mania correlated positively with a lot of things. This was the number and the duration of incoming calls, as well as the number and duration of outgoing calls, but also the number of outgoing text messages. So these patients were really active. They were communicating. This is what we call social activity, social electronic activity. So they were communicating a lot in their hypomanic state, just as we hypothesized. That's what you would guess from a clinical point of view. So this conclusion was simply that just these simple things may represent an easy and objective way to monitor illness activity with real-life data in bipolar disorder, and may serve as an electronic biomarker of illness activity. The last thing I'll just talk to you about or tell you about is voice analysis. Voice analysis as an objective state marker in bipolar disorder. Why that? Well, I guess most of you have tried once or several times that one of your patients called you in the telephone, and then you took the phone, and within a second or two you realize this patient is manic or this patient is depressed. Am I right? Isn't that a clinical experience nearly all of you had? So there's something in the voice. Of course, voice reflects emotionality as well as psychomotor tempo. When patients are in a manic state, they are speaking fastly, they're speaking loud, they are a little aggressive perhaps, or they are elevated and they are nearly singing, and they are jumping. They're jumping from one sentence to another. When they are depressed, they might talk slowly and there's no modulation. It's monotonous. That's what I want to say, monotonous. And all these data, you can analyze that, of course, statistically. So what we do in this system is that we do not record, or the French server do not get data about what patients are saying, not the content, but the way they are saying these things. So we used a toolkit. You can just download that from the internet. It's called Open Smile. So it's a toolkit to analyze voices. Voices is a scientific research branch in itself, analyzing voices. People within the university has for many years analyzed these things. So we use this toolkit, and it did not say that, but it includes a lot of variables about speech. It includes, in fact, 5,600 variables characterizing speech. So you have to do some machine learning out of that, because you get enormous amount of data, of course, as you can imagine. And we did that, and these are also detailed data, but I'll go on to this one. This figure up here reflects when patients are depressed. So that is, how does their voice, their composite voice analysis, how does that correlate with depressive symptoms in relation to Hamilton score? And the higher you are up here in the left, the higher the correlation, and that is the area under the curve is 78%, which is good, because when it's 100%, it's completely fit. It's up here, but that's rarely seen. But an area under the curve for depressive symptoms of that figure is quite good. In relation to manic symptoms, it was even better, as you might be able to see, and the area under the curve was 89%, which was surprisingly good. So the conclusion of this paper was that voice features collected in naturalistic settings using smartphone data can be used potentially as a state marker and seem capable of detecting prodromal symptoms of new episodes in patients with bipolar disorder, so we're able to intervene before these symptoms may escalate into a full-blown depression or manic episode. So this is just a summary. I think it is that patients are able to, in some way, validly self-report data. The randomized control trial was overall negative. It may deteriorate depressive symptoms, but stop or reduce manic symptoms, and that continuous objective automatic collection has some real perspectives in that, because a lot of these data correlate with depressive symptoms and manic symptoms according to clinical ratings. So I think it's fair to say, at least these are some of the perspectives, that we need more research, but this may in fact change rather fundamentally our treatment in the future, and it may also add to research within bipolar disorder, which I think is heavily needed. So thank you for that.